Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, there's been considerable criticism, as you might have heard, of the political parties in that joint report by the two main US institutes that monitor elections in Nigeria: the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute, as well as by the European Election Observer Mission here. All three were unequivocal in their accusations that both the ruling incumbent APC and the opposition PDP were involved in violence, intimidation of voters and election officials, attempts to manipulate the electoral process in their favor, and vote buying, as well as abuse of the power of incumbency at both federal and state levels, which led to a compromise of the electoral process. They also accused the parties of holding opaque primaries, which were marred by outright manipulation and selections rather than elections. Strong, strident criticism. But will it make a difference? Well, we'll speak to the political parties in a moment. But first, let's hear more of the criticism that was leveled against them by the election monitoring groups.
When the person who emerges in the primaries is not in favor with the political godfather, then at times it's like all hell is let loose in the party. And there's a lot of disruption of the system. What to do about this? I'd like, first of all, to agree with what my colleague just said, that the level of desperation to get into political office itself is something that has to be addressed. The fact is that the stakes are just too high. The perquisites of electoral office in Nigeria are stupendous. So people are willing to kill and to die in order to get into those positions. And this is an issue that we must address as a nation.
That's a clip there from the press conference held by the two main US institutes that monitor elections in Nigeria, the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute, and their criticism of the political parties here in Nigeria. Well, for reaction to all that, I'm joined now in the studio by Dr. Segun Oshinaga, who's a communications strategist with the ruling APC party, and by Honorable Mark Gbillah, who is an opposition PDP member of the House of Representatives. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. I'll start with you, Honorable Mark Gbillah. What's your initial reaction to the reports by these election monitors, primarily the US institutes, the NDI and the IRI, and the EU Observer Mission? Both have been very critical of the conduct of the election, stopping just short of describing it as a massive con job.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me very quickly take exception to the last comment by the spokesperson of, I think it was the NDI or the IRI, talking about stupendous remuneration or something about political office holders in Nigeria.
You mean the large amounts of money you pay yourselves?
Well, that they believe or they think are paid to us. That, I think, was unfair.
So you're not paid large amounts of money?
No, so that, I want to make that correction, because
right, okay.
if we
well,
were
the
to go
jury
into
is out on that.
a comparison of what our colleagues in the US and in their climes are paid, you would realize that ours is something more like pittance.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't want to get into that because there's a lot of
let
arguments
me go ahead.
against what you're saying. Yes. So let's move on and talk about the main issue here.
So, but yes, our party has obviously already put out a position in this regard, applauding these institutions in the very neutral manner in which they carried out their work and the truthfulness of the report. And I am going to support the position of my party because I personally also agree in that regard. And fortunately, it is on record that it is our party that has not displayed what they found out to be a desperate lack of willingness of incumbent government to relinquish power like they very sincerely.
Well, they were equally
articulated.
critical of the PDP as
Yes,
they
but
were
I'm
of
talking,
the APC.
I'm talking, we haven't absolved ourselves of
Right,
blame
okay.
with regards to what they pointed out in terms of primaries and all of that. And there's obviously an effort on the part of our party. You can see from the presidential primaries, which we are judged to have been the most transparent compared to well, let me not be, let me try to be economical with
Right.
words, compared to what the APC conducted,
Is that
which
so?
was pretty much a selection of their candidate with no opportunity for any opposition whatsoever. One starts to wonder if we're in a draconian era.
Well,
in
let
this
me bring
country.
Dr. Segun Oshinaga in there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Do you agree with their assessment that the ballot was peppered, as it were, by numerous irregularities, lacked credibility and transparency?
To some extent, they are right. Our political process has, for so long, been like that. We've even had wars times. 2007 is adjudged to be an all-time electoral irregularity.
Right.
But having said that, let me say that what made 2019 particularly that troublesome was the desperation of the opposition to literally capture power.
I think that's really fun.
That is the truth. that they went to unusual levels to undermine the present government and to steal power practically. That's my view.
Right, and then you stole it back, did you?
Oh, well, of course, an action requires a reaction.
Let me ask you this. Does it bother you at all, beyond the rhetoric and the jocular sort of exchanges, does it bother you at all that you, the APC, I mean, in the presence of the international community, we heard the observers there, have failed to give Nigerians an election that could be conclusively said to be free and fair, when you were brought into office because of a process that the former PDP leadership insistently refused to manipulate in their favor, that you have taken this country away from the right path of electoral rectitude into an uncertain future.
that
a
is-
case of one step forward in 2015, two steps backward in
That
2019.
is absolutely not true. That the 2019 election fared worse than 2015.
Well, the
It's a
observers,
myth.
everybody said
it's
All out there.
a myth.
The jury is out already.
The
on
truth
that,
about
in
it
that
was
regard.
that in 2015, the extent of the victory of APC was too much for a PDP to counter.
On the contrary.
And by the way, in 2019,
What was your job again? Communication strategist? Communication strategist?
and a damn good one, trust me.
I'd say.
Well, the truth about it is that the desperation of the PDP complicated the elections of 2019. And you will see from the beginning, going to Dubai, the Dubai strategy, trying to literally force the hands of the ruling party, take power from them. By
I don't
all
understand
means.
what you mean.
No,
let
no,
me bring him in, because we haven't got that much time left.
Won't.
Let me
I'd
bring
appreciate it.
Honourable Gbillah in
Now,
there.
it's rather ironical and amusing that he would refer to the desperation of the PDP. The report is very clear. The jury is out in that regard. It's nothing to hide. The report clearly indicates, and the APC is the incumbent government. So I don't know why he wants to make that very baseless.
Right, so is it
assumption
your
or accusation.
assessment, Honourable Gbillah, that this report from both the EU and the US institutes has helped to
Corroborate.
well, to legitimize your protests against the results that emerged, or has it hindered it?
Absolutely, it has legitimized our reservations and the entire nation's reservations about the conduct. And unfortunately, he is unwilling to admit that this election, superintended under a government and a party that touts transparency and anti-corruption turned out to be worse than what a party they accused of corruption superintended in 2015. The entire world confirms this. These reports all confirmed it, that this election fell completely short of the high expectations Nigeria had after the achievements of 2015. Now, it is unfortunate that even under this government, who gave the lame excuse that the Electoral Act was brought too close to the election, have they forgotten that under President Goodluck Jonathan, the same thing transpired? But as a statesman that he was, and a patriotic Nigerian, he still signed it into law. And that is what led to the transparency that we saw in 2015. This president, this administration had that same opportunity, but they lost it, and Nigerians have taken note of that. And that precipitated what we saw in 2019 that has been very clearly and randomly condemned by every reasonable observer mission in this country.
And we've got 90 seconds. I'm going to bring you in to respond, Dr. Oshinaga, there. Are we listening to a sore loser syndrome in Nigerian elections, or is he making a legitimate point?
Well, sore loser is right. They have refused to accept the fact that the majority of Nigerians preferred President Buhari, that he has a popularity and a controlling popularity across the breadth and
well,
length.
those who observe the elections don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, they don't agree with the fact that there were sharp practices on both sides. That's what they said. And I'm saying to you that the desperation of PDP worsened matters, but that this president won fair and square, because even when he wasn't in power, when he had no instrument of power, he had 12 million votes.
But I don't understand how he can win fair and square. You say he won fair and square, but at the same time you concede that the election observers are right when they say the elections fell far short of credible expectations.
Even in America.
Right.
I mean,
okay, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. We'll come back to you. We're going to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including we'll have more reaction from the two main parties, the APC and the PDP, to the final reports of the main international groups that monitored the 2019 presidential elections in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu, and we're eliciting reaction from the two main parties, the APC and the PDP, which were roundly criticized by both the US and the EU election monitoring reports for reportedly supporting and presiding over multiple irregularities in the 2019 election. With me in the studio, Dr. Segun Oshinaga, who is a communications strategist with the ruling APC party, and Honorable Mark Gbillah, who is an opposition PDP member of the House of Representatives. Thank you for staying with us. And you were making a robust defense before we went on a break. We were talking about the fact that to some extent, you've emboldened corrupt politicians and empowered the autocrats, because the APC and its government appear to have happily endorsed what, for all intents and purposes, is being seen by many Nigerians, as well as credible foreign observers, as a fraudulent election. Well,
Charles, you must understand the fact that the leadership requirement methodology in Nigeria is faulty. It's you don't have quality minds joining politics. So what you have largely are those who are motivated by how much they will make. My colleague was denying the fabulous payments that they get. If you Google it, Google is your friend.
Of course, in that case, we're not talking APC or PDP. We're talking birds of the same feather.
No legislator in the whole of the world earns the criminal amount that ours earn.
Nevertheless, let's not deviate
that is
from
completely inaccurate.
That's just
from the
and
focus.
an example.
Right.
An
I'm
example
disappointed that Segun is saying this
because of the
you can
kind,
Google what we're
the
saying.
kind of money
it's out there
the
online,
kind,
and you can find out. That is
well, yeah, but
absolutely-
what you guys keep
that's
talking
absolutely
about, and let's just
ludicrous.
rest this so we
That's
can move on.
absolutely
What
ludicrous.
you guys in the National Assembly talk about in
Yeah.
your defense
Yeah.
is your base salary. I
No,
mean, you
no,
can
no,
make
we're
reference
also
to a base
we're
salary
also talking
and
about-
say, I make a penny a month,
No, we're
but
also
then
talking about-
I
we're
make $1
talking-
million in
No,
allowance.
no, we're also talking about allowances.
Oh, come on.
We're also talking
come
about allowances.
on.
There's an analysis that was done by the National Institute of Legislative Studies. It's online, comparatively with Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda.
Well,
And
I've
we still
seen
earn
ones
less.
that-
And
that-
I've seen, and
Gbillah.
when he talks about everywhere in the world, the membership representation of allowance of a House of Reps member equivalent in the U.S. is about $1.3 million.
Right.
Gbillah.
Okay. Well, let's not
So
get hung
let's
up on
not-
that, and let's not gang up on you because it's not really fair on you. Let me ask you this, Honourable Gbillah: what is the current state of the PDP's appeal against the election at the tribunal?
Well, we have all been witness to the very ludicrous and embarrassing claim by the INEC that they do not have a server. And another time we will hear that the server was only used in 2018. It is embarrassing that an institution like that would come out on national television before the entire world to deny the existence of a basic ICT requirement for any credible and responsible institution. So how do they function? No wonder we're not being able to have a credible election. And then to indict them even further under this administration, you all know how much we approved for the INEC to conduct the election. You can please check the details of that budgetary allocation. The inclusion there was a server. So what happened? So somebody has to account. Your administration, your government has to account for what we approved as a National Assembly.
Now, is the Electoral Commission saying that at the tribunal or saying that in the public sort of arena, the media?
No, from what I gather,
Because obviously
and
they're
if I'll
two
be-
different
and if
things.
they're quoted accurately, they're saying that at the tribunal.
Right.
And that is why they will be held accountable, because they have said that under oath. And it's a serious perjury, if you ask me, if we find out, because we, as the legislature in this National Assembly, are going to insist, regardless of the fact that their anointed candidate emerged, on a probe and an investigation into the allocation.
And that should
we
be a
made.
cross-party position.
Obviously,
Yeah.
because everyone should remember that it might be important, regardless of whose ox is gored, for the interest of our fledgling democracy, to ensure that the INEC lives up to its responsibility.
And are you worried, Dr. Oshinaga, by what he's saying? I mean, the PDP members stay up late at night thinking, oh dear, they're getting close to wresting power away from us.
That's a dream. That's a dream that will never happen. Well, the server controversy, all I can tell you is that there is no law that says that INEC must transmit electoral results by server. So if it's not backed by law, it's a waste of argument. It's a waste of time. So if it's not legal, why are you expecting it?
No, but if they're allocated
it's the
money
storage,
for it, right?
And we allocated money for it.
Yeah.
INEC demanded
That's
they required money for that.
storage.
It's the storage of that information.
That's database.
Now that's exactly.
database.
Yeah, but there must be a database.
There must be a
Yeah.
database,
I mean,
and that
there's got to
database
be.
is in a server.
Yeah.
For those eggheads
Well,
in that regard, it's very clear.
It's in
and
the law court. Let's leave the courts.
Yeah, but I think
determine
you have to
that.
be very clear, because they may well have a process of storing information, but the use of the term server, because it's a legal question, may not necessarily bind them to supplying that information. Did you see what I mean?
Yes,
so you've got to be very clear on what the information you've
that will
got.
be trying to now look for technicalities, because it's semantics.
Well, of course, that's
As
what
far
it is.
as-
That's
exactly.
what the whole point.
Well, the
Half the legal work is technicality.
That's
Well,
right.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree in that regard. But The reality is what we should be looking at.
Right.
Now, that is where an institution like INEC, in my opinion, should bury its head in shame if they're telling us that for such a country like Nigeria, they do not have a server where they back up these details, where this data is backed up. Is it backed up in hard copy?
Yes, I would be mortally disappointed as well if that is the case, and in fact ashamed.
Mortified is an
And
understatement.
deeply worried. But let me bring you in, because we're running out of time, Dr. Oshinaga. Let's get back to the main issue, which was the international election monitoring in Nigeria. Has it become a good tool for promoting election integrity and democracy, or do you think there is a question mark over the validity and effectiveness of international election monitoring? You've got 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's a worthy thing. It's a good thing. I don't see anything wrong with it. As long as they don't get partisan. As long as they don't choose sides.
Right. Will you take up their recommendations?
Oh, sure. We need to...
as long as you remain in power.
No. Our electoral system needs to be regularly updated. It's evolving.
Okay, very quickly, Dr. Tessa, 10 seconds. Your
Yes,
final word.
let me commend INEC for saying they would implement the EU report at least. Let me commend those institutions for the work they've carried out. It is without a doubt clear that the achievements and the momentum that was set off by our party in 2015 was truncated under this administration.
Well, let me commend the two of you for coming in. Dr. Segun Oshinaga and Mark Tersa Gbillah, Honorable Mark Tersa Gbillah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.